Good morning and welcome. It's a beautiful Friday morning here in Abuja, the Federal Capital Territory. Welcome to Sunrise Daily. I'm Maokwe Ogun Yusuf. Okay. It does appear that my partner in progress will be coming up shortly, waiting for them at the commercial capital in Lagos. Sometimes you get to do this alone. Sometimes you have a lot of company. But let's see how far we'll get before we eventually go to Lagos. This morning, we're going to be taking a look at the commitment of the group managing director, of the NNPCL, Mr. Mele Kyari, who's given his word that the country is on course for the December deadline for the Port Harcourt Refinery to work. Before now, there had been big controversy as to whether or not that refinery was going to come on stream by December as promised. Don't forget that the deadline has been shifted quite a number of times. And finally, it does appear that, there is work going on and will be done by December this year, 2023. I mean, this is not the first time we've heard the GMD give his word, or even a minister give word that the Port Harcourt refinery was going to be completed. And this was even during the Buhari administration when there had been talk around how soon could the Port Harcourt refinery come on stream. But not just the Port Harcourt refinery, I think there was also talk around the Dangote refinery as well. But right now, yesterday, the group managing director, of the NNPCL paid, was it someone? Did he pay a visit to the House of Representatives? Well, he saw the speaker yesterday, and he gave his word that indeed, by December this year, they were going to be able to deliver that refinery, and the Warri refinery will also come on stream in the first quarter of 2024. There had been pressure before now as to how quickly these refineries could work, given the removal of fuel subsidy that happened with the pronouncement of the president on the first day of office, when he said fuel subsidy is gone. For a number of people, they said, how can you take away subsidy without ensuring that some of the parameters, some of the things we needed to make sure that production was happening in-house were in place? There are big questions in that regard. And looking at, just how the price of petrol has just been going up, everyone has said the only way this will not be a problem for Nigeria is to ensure that we're able to produce locally. Since we're a crude oil producing country, there was no reason why we should continue to rely on imports to fuel our energy needs here in the country. So, December is the deadline. Ayo, do you think we can take him at his word?
Mark, well, good morning. First to remind us that today is November 24, and it's a Friday morning. You remember, I think it was in 2020, we had this interview with the GMD of the NNPC, now NNPCL, and that was the time that one of the first times we heard that subsidy had been taken away completely. That was in 2020. But then, before we knew what was happening, we began to hear that, and I think, of course, it was because the price of crude in the market, in the global oil market, dropped completely at the time. But before we knew what was happening, of course, it would seem like there was some kind of review eventually, and then, whatever happened, and fuel subsidy tended to have remained, because you'd also remember that it was about after his own pronouncement live on our television station, on this platform, on this particular program, that the Minister of State for Petroleum at the time, Jimmy Silva, also said, well, subsidy was gone, but then, some other considerations were being made because of the people. So can we take him at his word? Well, it is his word, and what we can only hope that this time it is true. I'm looking at a report released last year where the GMD made a commitment assuring Nigerians that the Port Harcourt refinery we're talking about will be completed by March this year. And that was, how many months ago now? So that is there. But, for me, the value chain of refining our product in the country, I think that is generally lost on us. And many times when we talk about petroleum refineries in this country, we only look at just petrol, we look at diesel, we look at Jet A1 and those other basics. But there are so many other things that can be made from that. The devices that we use, for instance, and I think we've talked about this quite a number of times, petrochemicals, oils for vehicles and all those things. The entire value chain is amazing. The jobs that will be created from those are amazing. Parts for electronics in cars are gotten sometimes, most times actually, from petrochemicals, byproducts of the crude oil. Furniture in the vehicles, they are right there. So the value chain, the capacity for us to produce in country refine our own oil will greatly facilitate a lot of other things for us in this country. These facts are not unknown to us at the federal level. Now, when this Port Harcourt, and I'm saying when, Mark, because I'm also as hopeful, when these refineries indeed begin to work in the country, the question that I'm also hoping will be answered as the refinery kicks back on, and as you said, the Warri Refinery also, begins to take shape, is how do we ensure that we don't go back to where we are coming from? Sustainability is the key, Markwe. Unless we factor in sustainability of whatever initiatives we start, I don't see us going very far. I remember it was in the Obasanjo days between 1999 and 2007, I think, that the president at the time went all over the world looking for foreign direct investment in the country. Oh, yeah, he did his own bit, got some eggheads into his government at the time. Today, how much better have we done since that time? And now the president is doing exactly the same thing, going out all over the world, asking for foreign direct investment into the country. And indeed, some people have started coming. The question that I'm asking, Marco, again is, how do we ensure sustainability of the initiatives at the federal level? And how do we percolate those things down to the states so that there is joint ownership? You remember we had an interview with the Minister of the FCT now, who was governor of Rivers State at the time. And part of the conversations we were having was, what is collaboration with the federal government like in some cases, particularly in the Niger Delta, the NDDC issues? Well, he said, of course, that the conversation wasn't so smooth. These refineries are sited in states. What's the assurance we have that these things will have the collaboration of the federal government and the states to protect this infrastructure and monitor them, so that we don't go back to where we are coming from? That's the question. And that's not just the federal government refineries now. Those other smaller ones that people are talking about, modular refineries and the rest of those. How do we ensure that we are sufficient at home with even capacity to export? Limitless questions, if you ask me, Wakwe. Limitless questions.
Indeed, but I think we can this time around listen to the to the GMD himself as he spoke to the Speaker of the House of Representatives yesterday. And he did say this time around that you can hold us accountable. That's what he said. Hold us accountable. I don't know whether that was addressed to the generality of Nigerians or that was just to the Speaker. I mean, that's to the House of Representatives holding them accountable. So certainly we should be holding the feet of the National Assembly to the fire if they fail to hold the NNPC GMD to account, if the goalpost shifts once again. But he did say December is the time, the end of December is the time when they're hoping that this refinery will come on stream. Don't forget that Labour had doubted very strongly, or they had said, well, we're the people on ground. From what we're saying, it doesn't look like this refinery is going to come on stream, but part of what they had agreed was a joint inspection of the refinery as part of the deals shortly after the petrol subsidy was taken out. So maybe this time around there's something to this. Will we confirming from Labour if they too have heard or if they too can confirm that indeed the refinery is on stream to be delivered at the end of December? But certainly this is the NNPC GMD Mele Kyari speaking, and you may listen to him. Well, it does appear that that might be taken away. That happened at the House of Reps yesterday between the GMD of the NNPCL and the Speaker of the House of Representatives. In the meantime, we quickly move over to the dailies now. Let us take a look at what it is that they're saying this morning. And The Guardian, always focusing on the economy, has this as its headline: high OPEX, harsh environment hobble industrial revival, jobs. Okay, so that I would imagine that I'm trying to get what OPEX means, but I believe it has something to do with exchange, because right there you also see there harsh environment. So high OPEX, harsh environment, hobble industrial revival, jobs. Is there a big story for you on pages 4 and 5? You have the exchange rate, and they put it in bracket there. That's the black market rate. They're quoting right there. It's at 1,165 naira to the dollar. Interest rate is as high as 18.75%. And they say between 2015 and 2023, the manufacturing sector lost over 200 players. Factory output continues to decline in volume and value. And this is something that should trouble us all in a country where unemployment rate is very high. And a lot of young people, I mean, this is us with a really heavy or a really joining youth population, with many more joining the jobs market. So this is a situation we cannot afford. Pages 4 and 5 will give you details of that story. Nigeria ranks 144 out of 163 in safest country ranking for 2023. Is this an improvement or is this a decline? You might want to take a look at page 20. Jega, Babachir, others reflect on INEC 2023 elections amid fresh appeal court verdicts. Indeed, the former INEC chair was speaking at something put together by Yaga Africa yesterday, and he had a lot to say about the register and how we need to do a lot more work in making sure that that register truly has the names of genuine voters and genuine voters alone. Talked about his own experience and what happened at the time, why it was difficult for them to merge or to sync all the data that had been collected, not just from INEC, but from other collected bodies. You might want to find details on page 6 of the paper. And look at this. Nigeria loses $10 billion yearly to imported welders. Minister laments. It's on page 3 of the paper. I guess we can leave it there for The Guardian.
That's a sad reality there, Malkwe. Very sad reality. It's 10 billion to welders. Oh, wow. Well, something related to what we opened with, Malkwe, is on the front page of the Nigerian Observer this morning. And it's a little different from the normal. Skepticism, outrage greets NNPCL's promise of no fuel queues at Yuletide. Skepticism and outrage? Well, I guess we'll find out why all of that. It's on the front page of the Nigerian Observer this morning. The story continues on page 3 of the paper. About the nameplate, Edo governor drums state's investment potential at Belt Roads Forum in China. And there's a rider-only subnational invited to the Global Economic Conference. That's nice. So, I guess the issues aren't just going to go away. Right beside the nameplate, small businesses gasp for breath as rising costs threaten margins. You know, Mark, where I checked out, OPEX is essentially talking about the operating expenses of businesses, and this is what this story is definitely speaking to. The details of it you find on page 3 of the Nigerian Observer this morning. That's the paper today.
Well, taking a look at New Telegraph for you now, and they have this off-cycle polls. CTA carpets security agencies, political parties on vote buying, urges INEC to probe infractions. You might want to know who CTA is. The story is somewhere on page 3 of the paper, but the off-cycle polls certainly will be, talk of town for quite a while. Hopefully, it will not just be talk. It will be with a view to seeing how we can correct some of the things that went wrong during the off-cycle polls. This obviously still generating reactions from amongst members of the public. Well, take a look at this at the bottom here. Appeal Court reverses Nasarawa governor sacking, says tribunal's judgment a nullity. To rule on Ogunguba today, PDP governors express mixed feelings over appeal court judgments. Imo Guba CTC will occupy INEC headquarters today. Excuse me. That's according to Labour Party. The story is right there on the front page of New Telegraph. They also have this oil output. Nigeria targets 1.8 million barrels per day ahead of OPEC's engagements, OPEC plus engagement. You find that story right somewhere inside the paper. Naira weakens, something that is not very pleasant to read. Naira weakens to 956 Naira 33 kobo to the dollar at the official market. And a number of other stories right there. NEC directs governors to revamp agri sector, says states FCT owe 1.7 trillion Naira facility loan. So that story is on page 2 of the paper. Let's leave it there for New Telegraph.
Look at this Nigeria newspaper, and it is talking about food. Not very nice looking. NBS, Nigerians spend 61.08 trillion Naira on food and others in 6 months. Marco, I see where your money is going. Household consumptions account for largest share of real GDP at market prices, representing 57.18%, 68.05% in quarter 1 and quarter 2 of 2023. That story, find the details of on page 20 of the paper. Look at the bottom of the page. We've been talking about crude, stolen crude for a while. DHQ recovers over 500,000 liters of stolen crude oil in 1 week. How about the thieves? The people who stole the crude? Well, maybe you'll find the details of that on page 20 of this Nigeria newspaper this morning. Senate targets a $147 billion global bitumen market. Story you'll find on page 5. That's this Nigeria newspaper this morning.
It has its focus on the appeal court. Appeal court. NNPP wants justices probed over verdict. Page 4 is where you'll find details. I believe that this has to do with the Kano judgment, where the NNPP says that that verdict was in your favor, looking at the contradictory statements that was made towards the end of the certified true copy of the judgment given on the electoral matter in Kano State. Page 4 is where you find details. NNPP wants justices probed over verdict. Challenges judgment on Kano governorship at Supreme Court. Anxiety as APC, NNPP fix protests for Saturday. Inua Sule confirmed as Gombe Nasarawa governors. So big focus on the Court of Appeal. Page 4 is where you get to find details. Look at this at the bottom here. Terrorism financing. Federal government orders probe of prison officers. Page 7 is where you get to see details as well. Economic Council mulls emergency budget for flood disasters. Is right there on page 7 as well. And Wike to partner Cuba, Mexico on investment in FCT. Our story is on page 11 for you. Let's leave it there just before we leave it there, Azu's writing on the back page, quite an interesting piece. Letter to rich Nigerians, why the poor are mad. You'll find details. Well, mad in that context also means angry. So unless somebody takes it out of context. Letter to rich Nigerians. Is this letter addressed to you? You might want to pick up a copy of Leadership Friday, and let's leave it there for the paper.
The Nigerian Tribune this morning is talking about states and the FCT and how much they owe. That's it right there. States, FCT, OFG, 1.7 trillion naira in budget support facility. Isn't it a little disturbing that we've just been talking about trillions this morning? There's more of that that we'll be hearing this morning in the course of the program. For instance, 6 trillion naira tax waivers. Gosh. Anyway, we'll get to that one. Story is on page 2. Look at the writer. NEC rejects setting up National Flood Management Council, among other stories. About the nameplate. Lagos impounds 15 petroleum tankers for parking on Port Access Road. That story is on page 26. So, impounded. And then what? A slap on the wrist? Come get your trucks back? Or the VIS is going to do something? I don't know. I guess we'll wait. Beside that one, you find Kogi freezes state LG accounts. LG accounts again? Okay. Well, more of that you'll find on page 27. Labour Party factions clash in courts over suit against Imo governorship candidate. That story is on page 27, among several others on the front page of the paper today. That's the Nigerian Tribune this morning.
Well, take a look at Daily Trust now. They're focusing on the war on Gaza. That's the lead story on the front page. War on Gaza, Israeli-Hamas ceasefire begins today. 50 Israeli hostages, 150 Palestinians for release. Israeli forces launch fresh attack ahead of truce. Nigeria, 7 others reject selective application of international laws. West, Israel not ready for two-state solution. That's according to a Palestinian envoy. You find details on page 4 of the paper. But coming back home and looking at a number of stories right here, Nigeria drifting in health sector. That's according to the National Economic Council. Something very troubling yesterday, taking a look at signing an agreement with European countries on addressing brain drain in Nigeria. Very interesting revelation from the governor of Bauchi State, who says he's built a lot of primary healthcare centers. He used to have 3,000 doctors, and now he has just about 100 doctors left in the state. Does it speak to where our focus has lain all of the while? The fact that we hardly pay attention to human capital, and ensuring that it stays here to work for us. Page 4, well, maybe it cannot be an it, has to be, because we're talking human beings here. Page 4 is where you'll find details. But take a look at this. Alleged terrorism financing. Federal government orders probe of correctional service officers. They also have that. Kano residents panic as APC set for mass rally tomorrow. And why is this happening? This particular story. Kogi freezes state, local government accounts. Okay, did Kogi freeze his own state account? You might want to read details on page 26 of the paper. Let's leave it there for Daily Trust.
To be honest, Markway, I'm not as perturbed or disturbed by the fact that the state freezed its own accounts as I am about the fact that the state freezed the accounts of local government councils. Aren't they supposed to be autonomous by themselves according to the Constitution? Anyway, Business Day newspaper is next this morning, and you have this story on the front page, the national opening office in Nigeria. Dubai opens Nigeria office in bid to boost trade, says move part of 10-year economic plan. You're wondering why? Well, you get the details. I have an idea, but you get the details on the front page, and the story continues on page 29 of the paper. It's essentially about strengthening partnerships. I won't tell you the details. Grab your copy now. And right beside that story, FG unveils security strategies to spur mining investment. Ticket racketeering booms on Akpakpa e-call-up delays. Again, I thought we were over that. But hey, that's what you find on the front page of Business Day newspaper this morning. And above the nameplate, education, tech, internal mobility seen as key to retaining employees. Find the details of that, the rest of the details of that on page 21 of Business Day newspaper this morning. Well, that's Business Day and a look at some of our papers today. We're back right after now to take on the issues. Do stay with us.
The president arrives for the meeting with the chairman and members of the Presidential Committee on Fiscal Policy and Tax Reforms. The committee, which was inaugurated on the 8th of August, was set up to address some of the fiscal challenges confronting the country with an emphasis on fiscal governance, tax reforms, and growth facilitation. After the meeting, the committee informed State House correspondents that they had submitted a report on some quick wins to the president and will now focus on critical fiscal reforms.
Multiplicity of taxes. We have over 60 taxes and levies officially collectible by federal government, state government, and local government. Unofficially, those taxes are over 200, making life difficult for our people. So the objective we have, and that's what we're working towards, is to bring all of that to a single digit. So the taxes at all levels of government combined, we think should be less than 10.
The implementation of some of these recommendations will require some legislative inputs and constitutional amendment.
We're speaking to traders, Matan, and they said to us, people selling pure water in the market they call it tickets, 7 tickets every single day. Why should someone who is just trying to, hawk pure water to keep body and soul together have to pay 7 taxes on a daily basis? It doesn't make a lot of sense to us. So now we are at that phase of rewriting our laws.
The special advisor to the president on media also informed journalists of the president's directive upon receiving the report.
The president directed the special advisor to the president on policy coordination to liaise with the secretary to the government of the federation and the chairman of the tax policy review committee to ensure that the recommendations of the committee are swiftly and immediately implemented across all ministries, departments, and agencies of the federal government.
He emphasized the president's clear position that care must be taken to protect the most vulnerable segments of society. According to the special advisor, the president has also directed that the recommendations of this committee should be made a top priority for consideration at the next Federal Executive Council meeting. From the State House, Lanre Lasese for Channels Television News.
For that conversation with the chairman, Presidential Committee Tax and Fiscal Policy Reform, which the president had with that committee, happened some time ago. But the reason why we're having this conversation today is because just a few days ago, about 2 days ago, the Senate resolved to probe all tax waivers from the year 2015 till date, citing the fact that Nigeria had lost about 1.3 trillion naira to taxes and was in deficit of 3 trillion naira. All of this to tax waivers. So they say they want to probe these tax waivers that have been granted since 2015. And that's why we're having this conversation with the chairman, Presidential Committee, Tax and Fiscal Policy Reform, Mr. Taiwo Oyedele. Mr. Oyedele, it's always good to see you. Welcome once again to Sunrise Daily.
Thank you, Mark. Good morning.
Well, we did have a conversation with you shortly after you met with the president, and you also addressed the press and I believe by extension the generality of Nigerians on how you'd like to be able to merge taxes, and you did give us an update at that time saying that you were also meeting with state governments and the Joint Tax Board to ensure that things were streamlined, as you also have the mandate to implement the resolutions that you come up with or the recommendations that you make. Can you quickly bring us up to speed with where you are in some of the recommendations that you've made and the progress that you've made so far?
Yeah, thank you very much. So the presentation of the formal report to the president happened about 3 weeks ago. And since then, we've been working on implementation of those recommendations. Some of the recommendations require that we prepare executive orders, a couple of them to be signed by Mr. President. There are also a couple of orders and regulations to be actioned by the finance minister. We also have about 2 as well for the Federal Inland Revenue Service. And we also do have a memorandum of understanding with the governors, as well as an emergency economic intervention bill which will need the National Assembly to work on. But of course, the process of implementing that requires that you walk through the internal processes of getting a bill presented to the National Assembly. And that process now is at a very advanced stage. So we're expecting in the next few days, we should have a bill that's ready to go to the National Assembly. In one of our engagements, we had the Senate was really very kind to set up a retreat with a team on these reforms that we're trying to carry out, at which time we had already in advance let them know that we'll be coming back to them with many reforms. But first and foremost, to start with an emergency economic intervention bill. And we call it an emergency bill because of the sense of urgency and the need for us to move with speed on these issues, particularly because the nature of the constitution of the committee that have been asked to lead for our country has people cutting across. So you can almost take it for granted that the engagements are robust enough. They are inclusive. They've considered different perspectives. So those, different implementation instruments are different stages as we speak. The FRS, for example, had implemented one out of the three that we wanted them to implement, which is to do with tax promax. I know that this is not something everybody is familiar with, but those who interact with the FRS, this is the system for paying taxes, and it has some restrictions in the past, which they've now removed. But really, in most parts, the recommendations we have require that you amend the law. So we cannot do that until the emergency bill has been passed. For example, there's a requirement for Nigerian companies and businesses to pay some levies and taxes in foreign currency, which is not helping our economy by creating unnecessary demand in foreign exchange markets. And when those people cannot find the dollars to pay the taxes and levies, they actually also don't pay. So which means government also is unable to get the revenue in on time. So overall, we're making progress. Of course, if you ask me, I would say, we love for these things to happen like yesterday, but the next best time is today and going forward.
Okay, certainly good to hear that you are making progress in that regard, and we'll certainly be keeping our eyes out for the bill which you have spoken about, the emergency bill which you hope to transmit to the National Assembly. However, some of the, you also spoke to the fact that you'll also be needing the president to, sign some executive orders or move with some executive orders. Can you give some explanation to some of the executive orders that we can be expecting, or some of them which your committee is working on?
Yes, so there is one that is to do with data for tax. And what does that mean? We're trying to work on a technology-driven intelligence database system for our tax administration in Nigeria, and by extension, revenue management. And the way this is supposed to work is to collect the intelligence within the system. First, that will help us to identify who indeed is poor, so that for economic planning, because this is not just about trying to tax people, no. So for economic planning, once you have data, you know who is poor, and then you can devise interventions, including if the government decides to do conditional tax transfer in a way that is transparent, can be audited, is credible, and it gets ultimately to the desired recipients or beneficiaries. So this system will require that we create a new database that would allow not only just the agencies within the federal government to work together and collaborate, share information, but the good thing about it is actually national. So it's sort of going to cut across states as well as local governments. We also have intelligence system that we're receiving from the rest of the world. Nigeria has signed a number of agreements and treaties, including the Common Reporting Standard that allows over 100 countries to share information with us. So some of this information we're already receiving, but we need to create this system for us to do it properly. So some of the parts of the implementation of this initiative will have to be signed by Mr. President. Other parts of that initiative will require amending the law. So again, in the emergency economic intervention bill, bill, we have included provisions to amend the relevant laws, including NIMC Act. That's the the Identity Management Act. Will be amended, while on another hand we have a draft executive order which Mr. President will need to action. We also have some of the provisions that we are putting into an executive order relating to coordination and working together by agencies, more like trying to promote cooperation, and then also putting in black and white the way we go about policies, because one of the things that creates issues for investors is the uncertainty about the policy environment. We think those things need to be documented so that people would understand them, they will follow them, and when they fail to follow those processes, there can be consequences.
All right. This conversation now is going to come to the Senate. I mean, they have now resolved to probe tax waivers. You've talked about how some of the policies that have been put in place hobble the, or go against the, or will I say, hobble the ability of taxpayers to be able to meet the tax requirements of government, especially when you're talking about taxes that are demanded in foreign exchange, and that makes it difficult. But it does appear that sometimes some policies of government, especially with regards to tax waivers, have been abused, and the Senate is saying that they're going to probe this. I mean, they allege that we've lost up to 1.3 trillion naira in tax waivers, and when in deficit of about 3 trillion naira, and they want to look at what has been happening with tax waivers since 2015. Is this a part of your mandate? Is this a part of the mandate that your committee has? And what can you tell us in this regard?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, so the answer is yes. So this is part of the mandate of my committee. And it was also actually one of the things we discussed with the Senate at the retreat we had last month. I think it's about 4 or 5 weeks ago now. And essentially, the summary is that every country, gives one form of waivers, incentive, or the other. So, in principle, there's nothing wrong with granting waivers. But the way we have done this over the years essentially has meant that we haven't been as prudent about the waivers that we granted. We haven't been as transparent in granting them, and in some cases is being based on those who have contacts and access. While some are benefiting, you find someone else who is doing business in the same industry does not have access to it. And what that means is not only were we wasting taxpayers' money on those incentives, we created economic distortion that wasn't good for the operation of the market, and by extension, not helpful for the economy. So therefore, we identified very quickly in the course of our work that we needed to look at our incentives regime. And we're working through that process as we speak. So it's to try and rationalize it so that every 1 naira that we give away, one, is properly designed in terms of the targets. There's cost benefits analysis, which means for every 1 naira you give away, there should be more than 1 naira benefit that you can actually quantify and measure that you are getting back, including, even when they are not quantifiable in financial terms, but in terms of the other social benefits. The other aspect of it is to measure that properly and report it in line with the law. In some cases, you would even need to get the approval of the lawmakers because you're really just spending taxpayers' money. But having said that, I'll say that, as part of our engagement, and that's an ongoing engagement with the lawmakers, we will share our thoughts with them on this particular matter of tax incentives and the the oversight function that they want to carry out, which is okay. But it's important to mention that the 6 trillion naira number that was called out as the amount of tax expenditure per annum for over the past 3 years, the average has been about 6 trillion. It would interest you to know that about 3 trillion, actually more than 3 trillion, more than half of that relates to VAT. And when you also break it down further, a lot of it relates to exemptions that the ordinary people benefit from. For example, if you buy food item, if you pay school fees, if you do medical expenses, all those items are exempted from VAT, as it's the case in every country. So Nigeria, in that case, it will be inappropriate for us to then wake up one day and say, we're spending too much on tax waivers, let's cancel the waivers. So you cannot cancel those waivers. Some of the waivers also have to do with international treaties. So Nigeria is a member of the ECOWAS. Nigeria is also a member of the African Continental Free Trade Area, as well as also the World Trade Organization. So those treaties place some obligations on us. Maybe not even an obligation. There are things we signed up to because it's the right thing to do. Another those arrangements, there are items where, for example, within ECOWAS, you can't impose tariffs on those items because when you also export, they don't impose tariffs. The whole essence of having that union is so we don't impose tariffs on ourselves. So those tariffs would also come in as part of the waiver. When you import military equipment, so what you need for the police, the army, navy, those things you cannot be asking them to be paying taxes. You also have to waive them. So a good number out of the 6 trillion are things that we think make sense, that we need to sustain. But there's also a very sizable portion of that that we need to review, rationalize, and we hope that when we are done, those numbers will be numbers that are, really worthwhile. And more importantly, proper accountability and transparency on what is being granted, who is being granted to, the process of granting it, and following due process of the law in doing so.
Well, I understand that Ayo has many more questions for you.
Well, thank you, Mark. Well, so many questions, but I'm very, very certain we may not be able to cover them all. But, very quick one, Mr. Oyedele. Are we talking about 6 billion or 6 trillion? Because I remember at some point you had mentioned that we had, over the past 3 to 4 years, we'd given out about 6 trillion annually in tax waivers.
I didn't hear anything you said. Maybe if your tech people can work on this.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now, Mr. Oyedele? Okay, well, I'm hoping that you'll be able to hear me because there's a report, earlier, not even recently, where you had said that the Senate, beg your pardon, on an annual basis over the past 3 to 4 years, we gave out something in the region of 6 trillion naira within the past 3 to 4 years in tax waivers. Can you hear me now, Mr. Oyedele?
Yes, now okay. I can hear you.
So, is that a fact that we have given out 6 trillion naira in tax waivers over the past 3 to 4 years?
Yeah, so that's even 6 trillion annually. So which means over the past 3 years, you're looking at about 18 trillion. Not the exact number, but the average. So around 18 trillion.
Okay.
So that's a fact. In fact, there is a tax expenditure report because by law, the Fiscal Responsibility Act requires that the tax expenditure, which is the waivers, be quantified and reported. So in one of the reports by the former finance minister, that report was presented to the National Assembly, and that's where we pick this average number we are reporting, from, as well as the number that the Senate reported a couple of days ago. Yes, as a matter of fact, we are giving away about 6 trillion naira annually.
Well, in your opinion, I mean, even though you've, in your response to a few of my questions, you talked about the fact that we can't just stop the waivers. Some of them are treaty-based and all those things. How effective would you say that those waivers have been until now? And on the economy of Nigeria, on doing business and all those things, of what use have they been, in your opinion?
Yeah, very good question, Ayo. So, unfortunately, as a country, we haven't been measuring that, which is really the part that makes it painful because it will then appear like you just wasted the money you didn't even have in the first place. And those numbers are huge compared to our revenue base. If we were a country where we're making 60, 70 trillion naira and you gave away six, maybe you will say we can live with it, but we're barely even generating the revenue generated by the FRS in 2021 and the year before last was just, barely 6 trillion. And then you give that away in tax waivers and incentives, but we haven't been measuring the impact on the economy. Of course, if you are talking about waivers of VAT of basic food item, medical, like now, we also have requested that government suspend VAT on diesel for very obvious reasons, as well as suspend VAT and don't input import duties on CNG conversion. So there are things you have to do at time that are important because at the end of the day, governance is about the people. Those ones you may not be able to immediately measure the economic impact, but you of course can tell the social impact because if you don't make these interventions, the country will go up in flames and people will go on the streets if they find life completely impossible and they believe that government is being insensitive. So having said that, the other waivers, whether those waivers are to do with income tax exemptions, whether they're to do with duty and VAT waivers for some businesses, those even the economic, the free trade zone area where people can operate physically within Nigeria, but by law would assume that they are not within Nigeria, and then they get all manners of waivers from duties to VAT to income tax. And we know that those regimes are being abused by some of the operators who would then go into the free zone, which was designed for us to promote exports. They carry out their activities there, but the destination of why they've set up their operation is actually destination Nigeria. And they, in some cases, end up not paying the taxes that they should have paid. So that's why for us, this is an important area of focus. We are going through those incentives one by one, interrogating them and asking ourselves, if we're going to design a new incentive regime for Nigeria today, will this qualify? On what basis? How can you ensure that it's targeted? How can you measure the impact on the economy? And as much as possible for those incentives, we are developing sunset provisions into them because you may find that something that is appropriate today and desirable because of our economic circumstances as of 2023 may no longer be relevant in another 2 years, sometimes even before then. But it could also be maybe another 5 years or 10 years. But whatever it is, we'll be using data and engagement with stakeholders to decide and design how long do we need incentive for and put those sunset clauses in the law so that it won't be another 20 years before we realize that we've been losing money for so many years in the past, as we have seen historically.
I couldn't. A few times in your responses to us this morning, Mr. Oyedele, you've talked about the importance of data. And one of the things that we've heard from representatives of the National Population Commission is that census is the mother of all data. Now, we haven't had census in a while, and there's been conversation over the past 2 to 3 years or thereabout that we should have a national census exercise so that at least we can have not just a figurative or speculative idea that we are 200 million people plus or minus, but that we can actually have some real data to work with so that various ministries, departments, and agencies at the federal and state levels will be able to do the needful. In the absence of that census data, so Oyedele, how much of a shortfall are we? How deficient are we in terms of planning without those data? Because as you said, without data, we will not be able to achieve much. So without a census as accurate as possible, how deficient are we in terms of planning for some of these issues you are raising?
Yes, so you certainly need data, not just data, reliable data for proper economic planning. So I would agree that having a census would help in that regard. Knowing the people you have, where they are, what they do, their challenges helps you to have targeted policy and to direct government spending in the right places. For example, one of the important data we have is that the MBS told us, I think it was last year, that 133 million Nigerians live in multidimensional poverty, and they told us where they are, right? They even have a ranking by state. So you know the poorest states, you know the one that is least poor, but the reality is that we have poverty all over the place. And they also told us why people are living in multidimensional poverty, the dimension of the poverty. They told us, education, access to clean water, security, some basic assets, saving water, sanitation. Right? So you then expect that in subsequent budgets, at the state level, local governments and federal government will then prioritize our people the most and will make the biggest impact. Having said that, I would also admit that we're not starting from ground zero at all. We do have a lot of reliable and credible information that we can use even as of today. Take, for example, NIN. So NIN has tens of millions of Nigerians who have registered. Mobile phone, we have over 100 million Nigerians on mobile phone. Not only is that a form of identification, we also you can observe their behavior based on data, phone call. I'm not saying government should be monitoring what they're doing. I'm just saying if somebody is spending 10,000 naira on data a month, they're not the poorest person in Nigeria, not very likely. But somebody is spending 150 naira, flashing people all over the place, they're poor. It also gives you intelligence as to where people are. Each time you make a call, so like this call we're having now, the system knows that I'm calling you from Lagos. So we have that. You have BVN. You also have other information that you can use. People who are registered for taxes, businesses that are registered with the Corporate Affairs Commission. So what we are doing in the meantime, so we don't say we all have to wait for there to be a census, is to start with what we have. So whatever we have now that's reliable, let's start planning based on that in terms of how we manage the economy, in terms of how we design the fiscal system, the burden of tax, because my view has always been, and supported by data, that people at the lower end of the ladder of society have carried too much burden historically, whether they be small businesses or low-income earners, that in many countries are protected with thresholds that are reasonable so that you can live a honest life without being frustrated. So the way it is today is if you earn 40,000, 50,000 naira or 30,000 naira minimum wage and you're a honest person, you cannot live. You cannot live, even if you're single, you're alone. I don't know how anybody survives on 30,000 naira a month unless you're really in a village where you don't pay rent, you don't do transport, you're able to farm your own products, and so on and so forth. So essentially, we want to start with the data that we have and build from there, and then systematically make sure that Nigeria as a country pay more attention to data. There's one thing, and I always say that it's good to be inclusive, which means ensure that there are different perspectives around the table when you're formulating policies. But all those, your inclusion and diversity will mean nothing if you haven't invited data to be on the table. So that's really critical for us. And I'm speaking about data, and also as a form of reminder that the work of our committee is not just about tax, it's fiscal policy which cuts across revenue beyond tax, how government spends those revenue, the way we report them, how we comply with the law. And one of the things we've found out as part of our work so far is the fact that Nigeria has so many assets, physical assets, so many resources, so many interests in organizations. Some of them are government-owned enterprises. Some of them are interests in commercial organizations. And we were surprised that in some cases, some of these entities were registered and owned by individuals. So you go to the Corporate Affairs Commission, and the person who is a shareholder to a government entity is an individual, whereas you have the Ministry of Finance Incorporation Act that requires that all government interests, all government assets should be managed by that entity, such that even when we said we're going to securitize NLNG dividend, we should have been talking about securitizing some of the returns of these MOFI entity. One thing you get is by bringing those assets together, you have clarity as to the size of your assets. You can also manage them efficiently so that they're giving you the right return that they should give you. The ones that you are not best placed to manage as government, you can sell them off. And we're working on this now. The law setting up the Ministry of Finance Incorporated is a law of 1959. And we're saying to ourselves, why did it take us so long to realize that we even need to amend that law? So I was very pleased to see that the House of Assembly, the House of Representatives, has picked up this, and then there's a draft now, which we also hope that in the coming months we go to the National Assembly and we can begin to start putting these assets and resources together in a way that is transparent, efficiently managed, and Nigerian people can get, the right return for their endowments.
It's a lot of work already, and I can't get off of my head the importance of collaborations among MDAs and particularly between the federal and state governments. More of that conversation, I'm pretty sure, is going to happen again. We have to thank you at this time for being a part of our conversation. Mr. Taiwo Oyedele, Chairman, Presidential Committee on Fiscal Policy and Tax Reforms. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
We'll take a short break, and when we return, there is more.
The conclusion of an election is the beginning of another electoral cycle. The 2023 general elections may be behind us, but we cannot forget the lessons from the general election as we gradually march towards 2027. Now is the time to identify the gaps and together chart pathways to improve the quality of elections in Nigeria. Do you have recommendations on how to improve the quality of elections in Nigeria? Join the Citizens Town Hall on Electoral Reform on the 20th of November 2023 from 10 a.m. at the Ladi Kwali Hall, Abuja Continental Hotel, Abuja, or watch live on Channels Television and Arise TV. To participate in person, register via www.yaga.org/Citizens Town Hall or submit your memorandum to the committee via inecsenatecommittee@gmail.com. You can also join the conversation on social media using the hashtag ElectoralReformNG. Make your voice count. The Citizens Town Hall on Electoral Reform is organized by the Joint Senate and House Committee on Electoral Matters in partnership with Yaga Africa with support from the European Union.
It's our biggest sales event of the year. Some call it Black Friday, Africans call it. When you shop every day like it's a holiday. Discount your prices, so shop all you want. Black Friday like you've never seen before. Then you go and say, thank God it's Yakata. Kunga Yakata from 1st till 30th of November 2023. Genuine products are cheaper at Kunga.
In today's ever-evolving and challenging landscape, transformational leadership is your gateway to success. Join the TechSem Senior Executive Program to unlock cutting-edge strategies and insights for victory. Experience the enrichment of strategic leadership skills, resilience, and a sustained competitive advantage. Seize this golden opportunity to empower yourself and your organization to thrive. Join illustrious TechSem's faculty, including Harvard's Maximize Your Board founding director, Professor Rodria Lalline, renowned survivor John Peters, and London Business School's alumni, Professor Paul Griffith, at Hilton, London, from November 27 to 30. Invest 5,969,000 naira in your future for strategic outcomes. For details, email exec@techsem.co.uk. TechSem, insights that inspire, actions that change the world.
Now Olumide Apata. See us we dey like beans and rice. Labour Party, I will never leave your side. I will never ever. I dedicate my time forever, time to you, my people. Even if the road is rough, I know mine. 'Cause together we shall stand. Labour Party, who's your guy? Now Olumide Apata. See us we dey like beans and rice. 'Cause together we shall.
Discover Lipton's flavorful and balanced taste. We pick fine quality tea leaves from selected tea gardens around the world to give you Lipton Yellow Label's flavorful and balanced taste in every sip.
The roads leading to the Court of Appeal Abuja are condoned of by security agencies as supporters from the People's Democratic Party, PDP, and the All Progressives Congress, APC, from Nasarawa State eagerly wait for the verdict of the governorship election judgment. Inside, the courtroom is not filled as expected. In attendance are top APC and PDP faithful from Nasarawa State and lawyers, all waiting patiently for the commencement of the day's proceedings. The three-member panel led by Justice Uchechukwu Onyemenam arrive and delivers the judgment immediately. The panel held that the tribunal led by Justice Ezekiel Ajayi acted in error in using witness statements on oath not front-loaded as required by law to arrive at the conclusion of nullifying the election of the governor. Since the statements used by the tribunal to sack the governor were not front-loaded in compliance with the law, the statements were the product of illegality. They further held that the tribunal denied Governor Sule a fair hearing by not considering and making findings on the issues of jurisdiction raised at the hearing of the petition. The court also dismissed the overvoting issues used to annul the election, adding that the allegations were not established by law. The court subsequently reversed all others made against the governor and INEC and affirmed him as a lawfully elected governor of the state. Outside the courtroom, supporters of Governor Sule celebrate.
In any case, His Excellency the Governor Engineer Abdullahi Sule is a man of the people, and he appreciates the manner in which the opposition fought, and he has always been given a level playing ground for everyone. So going through the rule of law, I think is one of the things that His Excellency abhor and he appreciates so well. But this victory is one that comes with lots of excitement, and it comes with lots of relief, so that His Excellency will continue to deliver the dividends of democracy to the people of Nasarawa State.
The justices have done justice to this case, and you can see that going by the judgments and the pronouncements, it was a thoroughly delivered judgment. I should take it that this is one of those things that happen. We must all come together and throw away all differences that these elections have cost us, so we can come together as a people to unite as one and develop our state. Our state needs all of us.
The PDP reacts to the judgment, saying it will appeal the judgment.
What was contested was the computation, and this computation are done at the ward levels, and the various ward agents came before the tribunal and gave competent testimony about what took place with respect to the computation. Strangely, INEC, which did the computation, did not bring a witness to dispute the mathematical calculation, which the tribunal also did, utilizing the evidence that was tendered before it. So it is rather strange for this court to come to that determination. I think it was rather a very strange misconception of the case. And happily, this is not the final court in this matter. We already have instructions to test the decisions that have been rendered this afternoon, and we have already swung into action. Attention will now shift to the Supreme Court for the filing of the appeal and the subsequent decision on the actual winner of the Nasarawa governorship election. Emanuela Ekele, Channels Television News.
So we're taking a look at what has been happening at the Court of Appeal. Well, maybe we should say at the courts in general. In recent times, we have seen some controversy emanating from the judgments as given by their lordships from the Courts of Appeal. Before now, there had been complaints about inconsistencies. I guess to stem this, the president of the Court of Appeal had said that there were only going to be two jurisdictions in which judgments would be given. One from the Lagos Court of Appeal and the other from the Abuja Court of Appeal. But has that really worked? Because it does appear that the term inconsistency was taken to another level only recently in the judgment given in the involving the governor of Kano State when the matter was tabled before their lordships. It does appear that in their closing statements, there were some inconsistencies. One giving favor giving judgment in favor of the current governor. A second sentence dismissing the entire appeal for lack of merit, and then the third sentence in the same judgment giving an award against the people who were supposed to be responding to that particular judgment. And people have said that is a level that they haven't seen. The registrar of the Court of Appeal has said, look, this is a typographical error which will be corrected, that the judgment, the oral judgment as given by the justices, remains valid as the case might be. But there are those who believe that something must have gone wrong. And this is not without basis. And this is coming from the ICPC, some of the figures that we have right now, because in Nigeria, it is no news that corruption is rife. There have been allegations of corruption even leveled against members of the judiciary. It shouldn't be heard. It shouldn't be the kind of thing that we're proud of, but it does exist. And there have been allegations coming from the parties affected that perhaps something was wrong in this particular matter. But let's just take a look at the general indices, which a source, if any source should know about this, the ICPC, the Independent Corrupt Practices Commission, would know a thing about this. In their last corruption index, which was released in 2020, they spoke about lawyers being the most responsible for offering bribes for favorable judgment. They say litigants followed with 21.96%, court staff, clerks, registrars, etc., 21.54%, judges, 16.88%, and government MDAs, 7.37%. So it does even appear that judges come higher than even civil servants, which is something that should trouble us. The source is the ICPC. And taking a look at that, it also indicated that cases of outright demand and offer of bribes are mostly linked to election matters. They also allege that the total amount of money reported by the justice sector respondents as corruptly demanded, offered, and paid between 2018 and 2020 was 9.457 billion naira. I mean, I am very curious as to how the ICPC, got these figures and whether they were able to trace, the actual, those figures. And if they were able to trace them, you would imagine that shouldn't they have been able to prosecute the people in whose accounts these amounts of monies were found, assuming, this were figures that were traceable. But these figures, as I quoted them, are from the ICPC, and these, general figures. I'm not saying anything has gone down here, but if we know that this is our sector, this is the judiciary sector, and it is not immune from the general malaise, could anything, all of the allegations that we're seeing around these cases, these multiple, or shall I say, conflicting judgments, some of them conflicting even in the judgments that have been delivered, should we just dismiss them with a stroke of the brush and say, oh, well, mistakes happen, and leave it at that? Would that be the right thing to do? Well, joining us to discuss this matter this morning are two gentlemen Mr. Monday Ubani is a former chairman, section of Public Interest and Development, Speedle MBA. He's right here in our Abuja studios. You're welcome to Sunrise Daily.
Okay, thank you very much for having me.
And we also have Mr. Mason Nejo, who's a human rights activist and also a legal practitioner. He joins us via Zoom from Akure. Good morning and welcome to you, Mr. Nejo. Okay, I understand he'll join us shortly. I did see him a moment earlier, but I guess very, very soon we'll hear his voice at the minimum. But Mr. Ubani, this is the situation that we found ourselves. We saw this controversy, especially with regards to Kano, brewing this week. Initially, it was the, shall I say, triumphant entry of the governor back to Kano, even though it does appear that the oral verdict given was not exactly in his favor. But upon a closer inspection of the certified true copy of that judgment, it did appear that the judgment favored him. And then we heard that the registrar said, look, this was just a typographical error. The oral judgment still stands. That matter is going to go to the Supreme Court now from the look of things. But so far, so good. As a lawyer, I believe that you've been scandalized by all that has been happening so far.
Well, what happened with regards to Kano is something that I think should have been avoided. Remember that there was this conference we held in Lagos, section of public interest, and it was the issue of judiciary in the eye of the storm. We know that as we have concluded the electoral process, in terms of announcing the winners, that those who feel aggrieved, the law allows them to approach the court, that the court will be under serious pressure. The stakes are high. The political cases in Nigeria, and I know, is something else. Even the election itself is like a warfare. So every eye, on the judiciary, and those pressures sometimes can result into some of the things we are witnessing presently. Now, in the issue of Kano, the court has clearly come out to say it was a slip, maybe clerical error. That's what they said it is. But people are giving a different, all manner of interpretation. But the court itself has owned up and said, oh, we made a mistake. Clearly an error. The oral statement we made or pronouncement that we made, we still stand by it. But when these things are being typed, due to so many administrative pressures, either from from the volume of work or from other issues they have to handle, a mistake can occur. And that's why even in our jurisprudence, we anticipate such thing, and it's called slip-through, clerical error. You can, while writing judgment, and say this particular matter lacks merit, you probably put do not lack merit. Or, so either when it's being typed or when you are writing it as a result of pressure of work, you can make a mistake. Now, a judge is allowed to correct that, even without putting parties on notice, because it's something that has no harm to the other parties. Is allowed. So if they now come up to say that it's an error, I believe because of this further appeal to the Supreme Court, that if there is any doubt whatsoever, or any crisis or any problem, that particular matter will be cleared at the Supreme Court level. That is my belief. So we don't need to kill ourselves over this, especially when they have come up to own up, oh, we made a mistake. To me, that should suffice for now until we see what the Supreme Court will say with regards to that.
Well, some people, some of your colleagues have also said there are different types of mistakes. They're, as you alluded, they're clerical errors. I think it was Mr. Chidi Odinkalu who was saying that, well, someone can intend to write Wi-Fi and write wife, or wants to write wife and write Wi-Fi, as the case might be. Those kinds of mistakes have been anticipated. But where you have entire sentences contradicting themselves, one giving judgment in favor of a first appellant, the next saying, I find no merit in this particular matter, the third saying, giving, fining, as it were, those who had brought the matter to court against whom the matter had been brought to court. I think the first respondents were fined, so to speak. These are heavy matters. This is not just something that one will make a mistake. It has to be an entire mistake of judgment, not a clerical error.
Yeah, in advanced societies, what they do that if things like these occur, they will carry out a very comprehensive investigation. And why they're doing that is to avoid a reputation, to avoid future, mistake of such being made. But here, most times we don't do things like that. We like to sweep things under the carpet. My thinking is that in the light of what the Court of Appeal has said that it's an error, there can be an investigation. What could have happened? Was it intentional? Is there anything behind it? Could it be any inducement whatsoever? So in doing that, all the facts, will be assembled in order to get, to the root of the matter, So I think what we're doing at this point is to, is conjecture. We are all assuming, thinking. But the proper thing is, can there be an investigation? What has happened?
Yeah, but as a lawyer of many years at that, has this come as a surprise to you? I mean, how often does this kind of mistake happen?
It does, because we are still human beings.
How often?
Not too often. As I said earlier, the sleep rule, may not be as elaborate as, reaching so much inconsistencies in one particular judgment. You are saying this thing, this is the fact. All of a sudden, you are changing the story in between. And then finally, their conclusion is also inconsistent with the second message you have passed to the public. So I don't know whether it could be pressure of work. It could be the volume of work these people are doing. It could be the clerk that must have done this. When you finish writing this judgment, you give to them to type. They are also being induced. They can be pressured to do certain things and all that. So it may not be the judge that must have done it. It must be probably from the clerk. So it is important that investigation can be carried out. And at the end, you find out that you will lay the blame at a specific person who may have committed it. But whatever we're doing now is conjecture. We're all thinking.
Do you think that it is in order, though, that an investigation be carried out?
Yeah, that's the best way to do things like this. I'm worried myself. I'm a member of the legal profession. And then this kind of a thing is happening. And the members of the public are looking at, what's going on? You made a pronouncement, and when it is now being written, certified through copy, showing a different thing entirely. So what do you do? For us, to have a sane society, the best thing to do is let's find out what has happened, who is culpable, and then there must be some level of punishment for those who are culpable. That's the way things are being in the civilized climate. That's my thinking. But things here, we can, let's forget it and let's move on.
Yeah, moving on. Shouldn't we demand it? I mean, assuming that that's the idea, assuming the attitude of the judiciary on this one is just to say, well, it was a mistake. That really meant nothing. Just much ado about nothing. Don't you think that it behoves on us to demand that accountability, takes place on this particular matter?
No, you see, we don't even need to demand it. It is about quality of leadership. If I'm in charge of a particular arm of our agency, and a thing like this occurs, I will be scandalized. I will want a situation where I find solution to it. Unless I'm culpable, I want to find out what happened. I'm the head, and this a kind of a thing like this has happened, and the whole world, is saying that this is absolutely, a bit, confusing. Why wouldn't I want to know what is the cause? Why do I need to be pressured in order to carry out an investigation? I will do it without any pressure. Look, what happened?
The head in this case is who?
Yeah, the head is the president of the Court of Appeal.
Okay.
Because the woman meant well in making sure that we have two divisions, to handle these cases, to avoid things like this. Remember, you said it in your opening remark.
Indeed.
She did that in order to avoid conflicting judgment and create some level of sanity. Now, in the process of doing that, you have discovered such a scandalous thing that has happened. Now, what do? You want to find out so that you can further, carry out reforms, even within the judicial cycle. That's my thinking,
So the president of the Court of Appeal now has a major challenge on her hands. But let's take a look at some of the wider, inconsistencies that had happened before now. Because usually when people refer to inconsistencies, they do not talk about it in the same judgment. It's just that this kind of one has been pretty peculiar. Yeah. What they talk about is the fact that on the one hand, it does appear that an appeal court on a particular matter had ruled in favor of something, and then it does appear that in a similar case brought before the same Court of Appeal, another thing is said on the same matter or something that looks very, very similar. And I think one of the cases that we've seen in recent times is that of the the Plateau State governor, and the judgment has sacked members of the National Assembly belonging to the PDP.
Yes.
And then people have said, look, this matter, we thought the Supreme Court had settled this, that this is a matter that concerns internal workings of political parties. I do not know what you have made, and if you've had the time to look at some of the judgments, because some of your colleagues disagree. They say, each one is peculiar in its own situation, and it doesn't appear that there have been inconsistencies. But some people maintain that these matters remain consistent, or let's say the underlying principles for these matters have been consistent, but the judgments haven't been. What are your thoughts on these inconsistencies?
Yeah, Mark, I will do some explanation, and it will be very simple so you will understand me. We're having issues with the issue of qualification. Unfortunately, qualification is both pre- and post-election issue. And so what we're having now is that in most instances, there is confusion at the Court of Appeal level as to where we should bring in this issue of qualification. Is it at the pre or at the post? And what are the facts that should support it? So I discovered that inconsistency arising from this issue of qualification. Now, if you look at Section 134 of the Electoral Act, one of the reasons to nullify an election is on issue of qualification. It is also an issue at the pre-election stage, when you are nominating a candidate, if he's not qualified. So what happens is that the pre-election issue, when it concerns this issue of qualification, it must be a member of the political party who must have contested the election alongside with the declared winner that can now challenge that nomination and qualification of that candidate. And you must do that within 14 days, after which you cannot bring the issue at the tribunal. Statute bad. Now, if you come to tribunal when election has been conducted, and the opponent, the petitioner now is not challenging the issue of qualification, he must be very specific as to what qualification is under the Constitution. That it must be sponsored by a political party, that is the law, and that political party must be so-called a political party that has fulfilled all the requirements in order to present you at the general election. So what we're having a problem now is that most times there is confusion as to what are the facts that can lead to issue of agreeing on issue of qualification, whether at the pre or post. That is where we're having a problem. In a Plateau matter, if you remember that according to them, there was a judgment of the court when they wanted to conduct the primary, saying that this particular body or ESCO is not the proper ESCO to conduct the primaries. And I understand, even though other people are saying that is not true of what happened, that particular judgment was not responded, was not obeyed. They went ahead to conduct the primary, producing a candidate now that has what you call in African parlance, Keleki. So these persons now, the opponent now, is now using it and say, look, if you are supposed to be sponsored by a political party, was the political party in compliance with all the things that are supposed to be done in order to produce you as a candidate? So the issue now, will that matter be a pre-election issue or post? The Supreme Court will make final judgment on that. Are you following me? Because most times we are confused, at the Court of Appeal level, at times when there are these conflicting on this issue of qualification. But my own happiness and joy is that the Supreme Court has always maintained one precedent on issue of qualification. If it is a pre, then you have no right to bring it at tribunal. If it is a post, you have a right to, but they have the facts for it to apply. So I think that this will be cleared finally at the Supreme Court level. That's my understanding.
Well, we'll certainly wait for the verdict of the Supreme Court on that particular matter. There are many more questions which Mr. Obane will weigh in on when we come back from this break.
Confidence that only comes from knowing you are fully sorted, to show up for you just when you need a hand, and when retirement comes with all its worries and storms, to ensure we will stand by you and give you the coverage that you deserve. Make the perfect choice. Choose PAL Pensions today.
PAL Pensions, your pal for life.
It's our biggest sales event of the year. Some call it Black Friday, Africans call it.
When you shop every day like it's a holiday, oh. Discount prices, so shop all you want. A Black Friday like you've never seen before. Then you go and say, thank God it's Yakata.
Kunga Yakata from 1st till 30th of November 2023. Genuine products are cheaper at Kunga.
The conclusion of an election is the beginning of another electoral cycle. The 2023 general elections may be behind us, but we cannot forget the lessons from the general election as we gradually march towards 2027. Now is the time to identify the gaps and together chart pathways to improve the quality of elections in Nigeria. Do you have recommendations on how to improve the quality of elections in Nigeria? Join the Citizens Town Hall on electoral reform on the 20th of November 2023 from 10 a.m. at the Ladi Kwali Hall, Abuja Continental Hotel, Abuja, or watch live on Channel Television and Arise TV. To participate in person, register via www.yaga.org/Citizens Town Hall or submit your memorandum to the committee via inecsenatecommittee@gmail.com. You can also join the conversation on social media using the hashtag ElectoralReformNG. Make your voice count. The Citizens Town Hall on Electoral Reform is organized by the Joint Senate and House Committee on Electoral Matters in partnership with Yaga Africa with support from the European Union.
Mr. Monday Obani, former chairman section of Public Interest and Development Speedle of the NBA, is still here with us in our Abuja studios, and we've been taking a look at some of the matters that have been emanating from the Court of Appeal that seem inconsistent, and he's been weighing on that. You have said that the Supreme Court will eventually, set the tone and ensure that all the confusion around these matters are straightened. But then we cannot dismiss all of the insinuations around corruption against the judiciary. It is sad. It is unpalatable. Sometimes, I don't want to say unfair, because some people will say people are innocent until they're proven guilty, until there is proof of guilt. But when you see figures like this emanating from the ICPC, something at the Corruption Index, you cannot dismiss them. You cannot exactly say this is not possible within the judiciary. How do we then, shall I say, take a second look to ensure that the judiciary is above board and that it is not the influence of filthy lucre that is driving some of these things that we are seeing in the judiciary?
In saying what I want to say, I'm not acceding to the facts, alluded to by ICPC with the figures. You mentioned it. You also raised out, if you have knowledge of this amount of whose amount of money.
No, I didn't raise that. I raised questions.
You raised questions. Why were they not being prosecuted and all that? What method of research did they even use in getting these figures and all that? So I doubt those figures. But is there corruption in the judiciary? There is corruption everywhere in Nigeria, even within your profession and all that. So the most important thing is, let's address these issues holistically. Let's not look at it from only one side. My prescription always concerning our judiciary is that we must take care of the judicial sector in terms of proper financing, in proper taking care of the judges themselves by giving them quality welfare. When they are taken care of in terms of salary allowances that they deserve, and then put structures in place that give them room to operate efficiently, then you can now also judge them when they err. If you don't address those issues and you now come to attack, the problems that crop up as a result of foundational issues, you wouldn't have solved the problem. So my own holistic, prescription is, can we look at judiciary, completely and solve the problem? There is no other institution in the world as powerful, as revered, as the judicial sector. This is only particular sector that plays the role of God in the society. They make pronouncement, and that pronouncement stands. You can come today as a free person and you are going to correctional center as a result of a pronouncement of a judge. God so much believes in judges, and that responsibility has been amplified by the society in asking them to do this backed by law. No other institution, not even the reverend, not even the imams have the power of judges. So in such responsibility, we must give them all that is requisite for them to succeed. Infrastructures, on the condition under which most of them operate. Most of them, in fact, I was in court one day, I told the Court of Appeal, one of the judge presiding said, Mr. Bani, two judges are in the morgue. They are in the mortuary. As a result of pressure of work, we're overworked. Even these electoral cases we are talking about. Do you know how many cases these people are handling? Sometimes they cry. They want to, let out their distance and say, we are being overburdened. No, judges are not being appointed to reflect the number of cases that are in the courts. Yet they're expected to perform excellently well without any. There are problems. So let's solve the problem of judiciary. I'm very happy recently there was this all judges conference in Abuja, where the president and the Senate president made promises of really taking care of the welfare of justice and then ensure that all the things that they require to succeed efficiently in the system will be made available to them. So it is when you do all that you can now place them on the scale and say, look, we have done this for you, we have done this, we have provided everything, so you have no reason to fail. So my take is that I'm not making excuses for them. I'm not saying there is no corruption in the judicial sector, but we must also address the fundamental issues of taking care of the judiciary and making sure that they work under a very conducive atmosphere. So we cannot judge them properly when these things have been done and they're not doing well. And then in the recruitment process, we have also said there are issues with it. There are those who are there who are not supposed to be there. And you cannot bring rotten eggs and put in the system and expect, this expectation will be very wrong. So we are saying, let's also address that squarely, even in the recruitment process. And then give them all that is required to make them work. And then now place them, on a scale and judge them appropriately. So I'm saying there are issues, but we must get to the root of the matter and address them squarely.
So you're saying that until we address those issues, until we, pay judges well, we shouldn't probe, we cannot probe corruption?
It's an intelligent question. I cannot say that. I'm saying in addressing the issue of corruption, in addressing all the factors that causes deficiency in the system, let's also include the factor that I've just mentioned. I'm not making excuses. Where there are issues of corruption, we have seen where agencies have acted, and some of them have been punished. We have known that here in this country, where they have been taken care of. But in doing that, let's also address this issue in addition. That is what I'm saying. I'm not making excuses. I'm not exculpating them. I'm not saying we shouldn't even investigate where that. And that's why I said investigation should be carried out on this one that had just happened. I'm saying that, but let's address this issue in a holistic manner. That has been my prescription.
Okay, let's go to Lagos now. Ayo.
Thank you, Markwe. I understand that Mr. Nejo is also with us this morning. He's a human rights activist. You introduced him earlier. If you're there, Mr. Nejo, can you hear me?
Hello?
Yes. Okay. Can you hear me, Mr. Nejo?
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you. Can you hear me?
Okay, good morning.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to, I don't know how much of what Mr. Obani said you have listened to, but the troubling fact that after the ballots have counted, then in the courts, court decisions overturn some of the decisions of the people, so to speak. That's one of the troubling things. For instance, as at September this year, 7 senators and 23 members of the House of Representatives have been removed from office by the courts. And of course, you are not unaware of the latest issues of governors being removed by the courts and all of those things. How does that come across to you? That after the ballots, the people's votes have counted, the judiciary is overturning them?
It is a sad, very sad situation. When you look at what is going on in the judiciary, like I said, is a sad one. There's nothing like precedent again in our law. When I was in law school, I was taught that precedent, it is the judgment of the higher court. The judgment of the higher court by the lower court. But today in the judiciary, what we see is a difference entirely. When you look at what is happening here and there, like the issue of Kado, issue of Plateau State, issue of Nasarawa State, conflict judgment everywhere. What happened to this issue of precedent? And Supreme Court is the final court is the final court. But today, Supreme Court will tell you, oh, don't eat yam in the afternoon. They will come and tell you that you can eat little. Just eat little. It's a sad moment for lawyers in this country.
But what do you think is responsible for such activity, Mr. Nejo?
Corruption. Corruption is everywhere. Let me tell you a story. A client came to me and said they needed my service, and I said, okay, this is what I'm going to take. And he told me that, don't worry, what I just want you for is just for you to go to court. I've discussed with this chief judge. I don't want to mention the chief judge now. I've discussed they're going to put the case in the one court. It's for me to just shoot. That's all. What I'm charging is all that I should reduce my money that they has already settled. You see this kind of embarrassment when the clients will come to you and be saying that kind of thing to you. That I've seen the judge, you just collect your own for you to just show in the court. This is what we are facing, my brother. I had my medicine when I was talking about remuneration about it. If you would like to pay them 50 billion, those who want to collect money will still go ahead and collect money. It's not all of them. Yeah. They are good judges, but there are some that if you just mention their name to any of the politicians in this country, they will tell you, oh, what do you want? Is he an expert or that you want? Will not also judge. You whatever. So it's not the. I don't believe it's the money. It's about the integrity. Are we not seeing what is happening in other countries?
So, Mr. Nejo,
but here in Nigeria, why is it that this place, our own situation is different?
Okay. One of the things that Mr. Ubani said, and I hope you heard that as well, which of course we might want to take him up on, is that some of it is because the system has made it such that it is easy, so to speak, to compromise the system. For instance, in the case of the documents that are said to have typographical errors, that he said that anyone could be induced in the court system, in the judiciary system. What do you make of that, and how do you think we can insulate the judiciary from these manipulations?
When our law is very straightforward, when you look at this all these judgments, you are asking somebody to come and prove. When you look at section 137 of the Electoral Act, it says it shall not be necessary for any party who allege no compliance with the provision of the Act for the conduct of election to come oral evidence if original or certified true copies manifestly disclose the non-compliance alleged. Today, Court of Appeal has killed this session, calling parties to come and be proven. And the session is very clear. This session is very clear. But today, all this judgment is not reflected in this session.
All right, Mr. Nejo, well, clearly this conversation is an endless one, and we'll continue to push the barriers until we get to where we're going. Thank you so much for your time this morning. Mr. Nejo is a human rights advocate and legal practitioner who joined us from Akure in Ondo State.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah, it's back to you, Marco.
Well, thank you very much, Ayo. Your closing comments as well. Just want to quickly get your own reaction as to how we should proceed while we wait for the Supreme Court, and we believe that they will straighten this out.
Yes.
You also believe that the President of the Court of Appeal should there be a review of the judgment, some of the judgments that have been alleged to have conflicting outcomes given, even the same basis?
The problem with National Assembly matters is that it ends at the Court of Appeal. With the lesson of insight, one probably begin to see the reason why the governor's matter ends up at the Supreme Court. It used to end at the Court of Appeal. It is things like this issue of conflicting judgment that made those policymakers to say, please, let it not end at the Court of Appeal. Let's come to Supreme Court. Supreme Court, most times, strengthened our law, especially in electoral matters. Where we're having issues, electoral issues. We don't have issue with contract, with consumer matters, but when it comes to election issues, it is the stakes that are so high that have now put pressure on the system. So what we'd rather do, which we have always been recommending, let's try as much as possible to get it right at the polling unit. Our electoral system must have credibility at the polling unit. If it does that, look at what happened in Liberia. The loser will congratulate the winner immediately. Because when everyone sees that the system is fair, that everyone is allowed to participate in the process and elect who will rule them, then the loser will say, what am I going to court to do? Because the evidences are overwhelming. It happened in Liberia just 3 or 4 days ago. So it is getting it right that we now put less pressure on the judiciary. We are putting so much pressure on the judiciary. And they are human beings. They are not God. They are not God. They are human beings, for God's sake. So these things are what, and let me tell you, the clerks, those that work with them, most time they can easily, because what is the level of training? I have had a situation where a court has ended a matter. Somebody went and brought a survey plan and inserted in a matter that was never part of the proceeding at the lower court.
Well, Mr. Obani, I'm sure we can go on and on. Certainly enough to talk about. We have to thank you so much for your thoughts with us this morning. Monday Obani is the former chairman, section of Public Interest and Development, Speedle of the NBA. Oh, we'll take a break at this moment, and we're back to discuss electoral reforms. What should be done? In just a moment, please stay with us. Well, we've been told the medicine to ensure that, the courts are not overburdened is to ensure that our electoral process works seamlessly. So what needs to be done with regards to this? Mr. Laolu Akonde, former presidential aide, joins us now. And I don't know, have you been able to decipher precisely what needs to be done to strengthen our electoral process?
Well, it's a very comprehensive conversation that started in terms of what are the new things that has to happen. But I think the issue of what happens in the court, it's a big deal. Like you remember, the Ways panel did one, and this was in 2008, in their report to say that the role of the court is becoming too significant, and the court is beginning to play a larger role, a larger than ideal role in electoral matters. This was in 2008. Now this is 2023, and it's as if we never got that warning. So I think this is a very urgent matter that we need to really try to fix. The judges ought not to be the ones determining the outcome of elections, and it's not a new thing. You remember the case in Rivers State of Governor Amici, who was not even on the ballot, ended up being the governor. So this is a problem that has been on forever, and I think the time is now to try and nip it in the bud, which is where I think your last guest made a very good point. We need comprehensive justice sector reform, comprehensive one.
Yeah, but he also said that the medicine to, the problems of overburdening the judiciary will be to make sure we get it right at the polling unit. So the question is, how do we get it right at the polling unit? Much as the Ways panel made that recommendation, there have been many attempts, because every year, every 4 years, we see that there's an attempt to amend our Electoral Act to put in more items to strengthen the electoral process. Yet, we still see more and more cases at the at the judiciary. It doesn't appear that there's been any correlation with the number of reforms we're doing and the number of cases we're seeing at the judiciary.
Yeah, and I think part of the problem is that there's a bit, or even more than a bit of impunity in terms of the offenses, electoral offenses that you have, the kind of violence that takes place, the intimidation, the overbearing incumbency factor. All of these things go on without being punished, without being there are no consequences for it. And so that is what affects what happens at the polling unit.
Are we really mature for this democracy? Do you think we're mature enough to handle it?
Well, there's no doubt that democracy is the best form of governance that has been invented by humankind. The question is whether our political elites are ready to serve patriotically, And I say that, look, if the political elites have 50% love for a country, just 50%, Nigeria will be transformed. That is one area that we need to focus our attention on. And that is why it's important for the people to understand that in a democracy, it is about the people. The people have to be aware, the people have to be engaged. And that's why I thought that the level of voter apathy is just incredible. 20%, of the registered voters, go
Even though there have been big questions raised about that register as to whether or not it is the number of people we say are on it that are truly on it.
That's true.
Yeah, but, talking about maturity again and, democracy, we know that the biggest instrument of ensuring that government runs and, governance is felt on by the people is through the budgets. There have been big questions this week as well as to how we have focused on the budget, especially with regards to some of the revelations that have come out from the Lagos State budget. And some of the people are wondering, where have we been? I mean, as a people, where some of these items have been inserted into budgets and some of the inconsistencies that we've been seeing in recent times inserted into budgets. And it raises questions. Lagos is supposed to be an example, but then when you look at the fact that we have 36 states, and also the federal government, have we really gotten to the stage where ordinary citizens are interested in what it is that their governments are doing on their behalf through the budget?
Yeah, I mean, very, very important point that you raised, Mark. And I want to say two things. Number one, if you look at the fact that people are now paying attention, there is a greater focus, especially on what is happening in the states in terms of the budget. So that is a good thing. The level of transparency has increased. So there's more attention that is focused on it, and you will expect that the governors will begin to also modify. You're going to see that, because once these issues are being aired, publicly, it will increase the level of even their responsibility. I expect that. So that is a good thing. Now, the other important point that I want to emphasize is that the poverty gap in our country is so tremendous that people will not, the ordinary man cannot imagine the kind of monies that are being spent on certain aspect of governance. Look, the truth of the matter is that governance is costly, and we can have that discussion in terms of what has to be done to reduce, the cost of governance. But if we're going to have a government, if you're going to have leaders do their work, there is going to be a lot of expenses indeed. But the kind of poverty that we have in our society does not allow the people to even begin to imagine, even if some of these figures were moderate. Now, I will say that there's a lot of excesses, without a doubt. There's a lot of excesses. There are things that have been cut off. But we need to deal with the issue of poverty. Poor people cannot reason that you need this amount of money. $1 billion in our budget comes to possibly even less than 1%. But don't tell that to a poor man.
Okay, so maybe that's where the problem lies, the fact that people are so poor, they cannot comprehend how much money. But, I think that this conversation will be something that will be ongoing. Mr. Laulu Akonde, we have to thank you so much for your time. We're sorry that we had so little time with you, but I think it is also, the point has also been very clearly made that these conversations need to go on. Thank you so much for coming on Sunrise Daily this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Laulu Akonde is a former presidential aide. I guess that's when we'll have to wrap up the program this beautiful Friday morning. Sometimes time does fly when you seem to be having fun and just when things start to warm up, or should I say hot up, as the case might be. But we do hope that you have a great weekend. Thank you for staying with us this morning. I'm Maokwe Ogunyusuf.
It's strange that I didn't hear Maokwe say, thank God it's Friday today, or did I miss it? Am I Makinde? Have a wonderful rest of your weekend.